If you were to ask me what is one single thing people should do in senior positions, that one single thing, Lee, would be to shut up. What if you were to be the third, fourth, or fifth person to speak in a meeting? See what happens. Chances are 3 or 4 of the 5 ideas you jotted out, others will surface. Now the value you can add is with the 5th idea that is truly unique.
So, Sabina, welcome for being here.
Thank you so much, Lee.
So to kind of get started, I mean, you're so accomplished. You've done so many amazing things. And now for the past 20 years after leaving Microsoft, you're helping other very accomplished people do even more amazing things. What gave you your drive to do that?
I wish I knew. I think it did. The thing that I've grown up with as one of my mantras is hard work, and that I've worked hard my whole life. That, I guess that's a drive, the drive to work hard. I remember, and I think I mentioned this somewhere in the book, that one time I was so engrossed in my homework and working that the power had gone out, which was not an uncommon thing growing up. So I was studying by candlelight, and suddenly I smelled something, and it was my hair that had caught on fire with the candle because I just get so engrossed in what I'm doing.
Yeah, I remember that from the book. Was that the culture in your family that everybody just worked really hard? And tell our listeners where you originated from.
Yeah, I grew up in Calcutta, India, and spent the first 20 years of my life there, and then came to the US as a junior transfer student to study computer science.
Okay. And what is the culture in India, or maybe just your family, but in general, is it more hardworking than here in the US?
Well, I don't know about comparison to the US. I think there's plenty of hardworking people everywhere. But for my family, for sure, hard work was a big part of our ethos. You get up and you get things done, and you keep going, and sort of persistence. I think that the drive, it's hard to keep that consistently there when you receive setbacks, which of course all of us of a certain age have had. And it's that whole ethic of getting up the next morning and continuing to work at it.
Yeah, for sure. I've noticed culturally in the US, just generally speaking, there's plenty of hard workers. And to your point, every job I've ever had, I was going to be the best at it, whether it was a paper boy delivering papers many years ago or being a dishwasher, it didn't matter.
Yes.
We've kind of lost that culturally, and I hope we get it back for sure. But it's interesting. For me, it's about the value that we create and getting excited and being passionate about that, not sort of sitting back and waiting for the world to kind of impress us. So it's interesting. What do you think's happening? Is it shifting in one direction or the other today? Where would you see that
in terms of the value?
Yeah, harder working culture or more entitlement culture.
Mm. I'm hesitant to generalize because I see exceptions or differences in everything. But we can notice the vocabulary even that is showing up, like hustle culture, which indicates, well, I'm not part of the hustle culture. Or I don't want to, do that. So I think that there is more of a shift, and I'm not sure all of it is necessarily bad. I had to learn the hard way through burnout a couple of times, because the first time wasn't enough, at great cost to me. That, okay, hard work all the time is not necessarily a great idea either. You've got to balance it with some fallow time where ideas can germinate, your body and your mind can rest too.
Yeah, for sure. I see amazing things going on, and I see areas that are opportunities to help nudge the culture in a value creation way. So I think we agree on that. You spent, so the last 20 years has been your consulting business. Want to get into that here in a bit. Your time at Microsoft, so about 15 years managing software development teams and those programs. My guess is there's a lot of interesting stories there around programs that worked, didn't work. I'm sure you guys tested and packaged and, did a lot of different things. What was that journey like going from that into HR and that work? And in the book, you describe your sabbatical and how you had a sort of an epiphany around that. Describe what that journey was like for you.
Yeah, yeah. It's obviously a very non-traditional career path to go from engineering to HR. Yeah, and the good news was that my boss on the engineering side gave me an open door to come back anytime I wanted. So it wasn't a super risky proposition. It really came about on that sabbatical with that fallow time, with that time just sitting on the couch eating bonbons. I suddenly realized it was no longer a matter of if but when I would become a corporate vice president, which was absolutely on my list as a career aspiration. And then I realized, actually speaking to value creation, am I going to create more value by simply chasing the formula that I already know for the next 5 years, or by forging new ground? And so it arose from, what are some of my strengths? And I had gotten consistent feedback that you're a good manager, you're good with people. So I thought, let me do some quote unquote people stuff. And and then that turned into leading a whole bunch of things around executive and management and leadership development. It wasn't a given that I would stick around in that job. It was very experimental. I had the safety net of my old manager wanting me back, and my new manager giving me a lot of grace. She said, "You're welcome to renew your lease as often as you want." But I was just hooked right from the beginning. It was fascinating, not only because it spoke to one of my strengths, but because this was the first time I had a more elevated perch to see what goes on across a major enterprise. What are the overarching themes? How does the whole system work? What makes somebody a successful executive or manager, and what tanks their performance?
Yeah, I love that. So I'm super fascinated by the whole concept of leadership development and what does it mean to really be effective there. And my businesses over time have had anywhere from 10 employees to a little over 500 employees. The biggest one, I spent most of my time developing the 64 leaders, and boy, did we grow fast, and we had an amazing exit and everything that came out of that. And I remember asking a head of HR for I guess, a medium-sized large company that had about 40,000 employees, and what they do for leadership development. And they said, "Oh, we have this great program. It's amazing. We get everybody together." I said, "Well, how's it going?" It's great. Well, how do you know? Well, because we get surveys back and everybody loved it. And then I asked a follow-up question. Have you looked into, after, following up after the leadership development, has it moved the needle on the results that they're measurably held accountable to? And the immediate answer was, we've got nothing. So it was a one size fits all, check the box exercise. And I have my whole philosophy around that, but you were right in the middle of it. How do you think about having a successful leadership development program in an organization really of any size?
Well, I really am not a fan of what we call smile sheets, which are those, do you give it 1 star, 2 star, 3 star, 5 star? And of course, many programs get those high smile sheet ratings, including mine, and we can game the system to get those smile sheets high. There's many tips and tricks, insider tips and tricks that we can do to tilt the smile sheet in our favor. But as you're saying, Lee, that's has nothing to do with the value, the lasting value that might have been created or not. And so when I was heading up leadership development, I told my team, more important than the smile sheet, actually, if people leave slightly uncomfortable, slightly on edge, that means they're learning. That means they learned something new. They maybe realize they have to unlearn something to be successful. So I'm fine with your smile sheets not being great. Let's do focus groups. Let's do follow-ups. And with the executive population of about 1,000 people, it was a small enough community that we would bump into them with great regularity. We had several regular events with them. So we could start to track what's actually happening. How are they applying this in this business? If somebody just wants to have a good time, they might as well read the book or my book, watch my TED talk. But if they're really trying to make change through coaching or a workshop, then you're going to have to actually unlearn certain things. My book is not about how to become successful. It's how to remain successful. It's for successful people. And successful people are sometimes the hardest to teach because they have a track record of being right for decades sometimes. It's hard to dislodge that comfort zone. And not just comfort zone, but something you've been rewarded for forever.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, in the situation I was describing, I recommended they stop all the leadership development training and buy movie tickets for everyone because they can enjoy themselves and see the movie they want to see.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
yeah, and so did you actually follow up to ask those questions like where did it move the needle, and do you have an example or two of a leader changing how they showed up? And I want to get into some of that stuff too because you point out things in the book that most I think never really think about. They're obvious when you think about it, but they're not to most. But have you where a couple of examples where you followed up and wow, the needle really moved and I achieved X more cash flow or something. Yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, not that long ago, somebody that I followed up with has started, has found $500 million that they hadn't found before in the business because they were able to create more of an overarching frame. And there were all these bits and pieces and death by 1,000 paper cuts, not to mention confused customers and employees warring with each other. And they completely reorganized the org chart. They created an overarching umbrella. They got very clear on terminology, so we weren't just fighting across silos. And now it's $500 million extra. They're now shooting toward even bigger goals. That's a direct result of some of the work we had done. There are countless examples of people who also say that their lives have changed in various ways. Everything from I have a better relationship with my spouse to I am much healthier, paying a lot more attention to self-care. And as a result, not only am I more efficient and effective at work, but I feel better. It is absolutely vital to follow up and find out what is happening. It also, which is why, for example, with some of my workshops, I offer a 3-month set of group coaching calls, so that the practice sticks around long enough to be habituated. If someone just comes to a class and everybody is busy, it it just falls by the wayside. Yeah, that was great content, but then I got busy.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things you talked about, so you do organizational design work, obviously. It's like
Yes.
everybody's in silos. Let's get together, get more aligned. And you talk about communication in the book. I think that's your biggest chapter. But
Yep.
you said something in there I thought was fantastic. The curse of knowledge, this concept where, as you advance, you may know more, but you know way less about how people see you. Talk about that.
Mm. Yeah. And this is curse of knowledge. This is also the downside to power. And power comes with a lot of perks. A cushy office, maybe a bigger paycheck, maybe even business class, and so on. But power blinds us. It divides us. It creates a chasm between us and other people. We think, look, most people in power, the vast majority, don't wake up in the morning saying, how do I make life miserable for people in my organization? But the people whose necks are craning up have a less charitable view of your actions. And are they actually going to tell you that? No, because the minute you become a manager and the higher you go, the less truth you're going to get. Because who in their right mind is going to say, yeah, boss, that was a really dumbass thing to do? Mm, yeah, I disagree with you. So there are other things you can do to reduce, to mitigate that. But that power gap creates an ignorance on your part. It creates a two-way volume warp. That is, when we communicate down from our power perch, it sounds a lot louder and a lot harsher than we ever intended it to be. Likewise, when someone communicates up, it's much more muted.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've always viewed it sort of both ways. There's how we show up as leaders and the
Yeah,
environment we create that releases positive, productive energy. But
right.
also there's a lot of, this is just how it is biases that are out there. Oh, they're the boss and these are the rules. And team
Yes.
members bring that in with them.
Yes.
So it's like busting through all of that from both sides.
Yeah.
Talk through that a little bit, because I think as a leader, I can be so right, I'm completely wrong because we didn't get the result. I'm not managing robots, so it's impossible. But how do you think about balancing those two things? The biases they bring with them that you have to show them aren't real here.
Mhm.
Plus improving how we show up.
Mm. Yeah. The thing that comes to mind with that question, Lee, for me is the notion of multiple meanings and the curse of the singular story. As you said, the more I know nothing, or I could be absolutely wrong. I was chuckling when you said that because, of course, our views most of the time are right. In fact, they're smart, they're great, and we should proceed with all haste and execute on them. But what about the times where you don't know something, or your knowledge is outdated, or it's not the right thing in this situation, but because you've had so many situations before, you are very quick to connect the dots. Just about everybody I coach says one of their superpowers is connecting the dots, which is great as long as those dots are meant to be connected. So, and if you come in strong in that position of authority with a singular story, nobody's going to knock on that. Nobody's going to provide alternate ideas. Even if you say, "Oh, who has an alternate idea?" They'll all go, "Yes, boss, that's great," and they'll start a secret chat group about how clueless you are. But they're not going to tell you that to your face. So instead, what if you simply had a session where you said, we're going to create multiple meanings. We're going to look at this from multiple different facets. This is no different than a game that I had created with my boys when they were much younger. As I reflected and thought, what are some of the problems that my coaching clients come to me, and how do I future proof my kids? So we created this multiple meanings game where during the time it took us to cross the bridge to get to their school, one of us would pick something at random. A guy crossing the bridge in a sleeveless leather vest with tattoos on his arms. And my older son might say, the tattoos are fresh and he needs to air them out because they're sore. And I might say he's a lawyer and this is his day off so he can show off his tattoos. And my younger son might say there's a tattoo parlor on the other side and this is his walking advertisement for it. Now, as they learn to grow and develop this muscle of making multiple meanings, they could both be right and they could allow other people to be right, because maybe all three of those things were true, not just one thing. And when we know that all three things are true, we see something more wholly. When we see something more wholly, we're able to produce different, more creative solutions to it. It also really helps with conflict. When my younger one was upset with the older one because he thought he stole a Lego piece, it was much easier to then say, because he had this multiple meanings imbued in him now, for him to then stop and say, "Oh, wait, maybe he did ask and I had my headphones on. Maybe it was lying on the floor and he didn't know it was mine." So he was less likely to clobber him now with that Lego piece, and allow for different possibilities so they could have a more productive conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. For me, it's look for the value, not look for what's wrong, and then raise your hand because you're so good at pointing out what's wrong with everything.
Yes.
And it goes to assumptions. What causes the assumption often to go in the category of our bosses did this on purpose to mess with me, which isn't the case. And so a super small example, I've had the opportunity to employ thousands of team members in my different companies over the years. And sometimes if you make a small mistake on a paycheck and it's to their detriment, even a dollar, $100, it just doesn't add up right. They get really angry like you did it on purpose. my gosh, like where's this assumption coming from? It's like,
Yeah.
no, no, like we would never do stuff like that. But where do you think that comes from in the workplace? Because you
Yeah.
touched on it earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. I think because we are in a fairly vulnerable position when we're beholden to power. The person in position of power has so much control over our destiny. Whether or not we continue employment, our paycheck, our bonus, our promotion, mm, the kind of work we work on. So when we're in this one less kind of way, and the boss doesn't do a lot to bridge that gap, I mean, it comes naturally that way with authority and power. We will then make up stories, which is why it's so important to make up multiple stories. We make up stories that are directed at us and that are more dire than they need to be. I tried this at a workshop I was recently conducting, and I said, what would happen if your boss emailed you or texted you on a Sunday to come and see them on Monday? What would you think was going on? And all the guesses were extremely dire. Oh, I'm going to get laid off, fired. I screwed up somewhere. They're really unhappy with me. There goes my promotion. All these stories that were really negative. And okay, so let's pause and make a few more meanings out of this. Could it be that they're actually about to give you some good news? You're going to get an extra bonus. You're going to get an extra promotion. Could be just as likely. Could it be they were at their kids' soccer game and could not add another line that said, this is good news. Don't worry about it. Could it be they're not as interpersonally skilled as they need to be and hadn't thought about the impact it would have on you? If you make those meanings, it lowers your temperature uh, significantly. And in most of those cases, of course, it isn't as dire as you think it is. We are meaning making machines as human beings. Urging your employees to say, don't make up those stories is just about as useless as saying, don't give in to gravity. So instead, just tell them to make up 3 different stories. Don't act until you have 3 different stories, very different and distinct. Because then you might feel less righteous, and a cue that you're barking up the wrong tree or that you most need to make those multiple interpretations is when you feel especially righteous and you're collecting all this evidence to support your cause, to your interpretation.
Yeah, I love that hack. That's a great idea because they're just going to come up with this stuff. We can't say don't come up with bad scenarios because it's not
Yes,
healthy. They,
right.
they, people do what people do. Human nature is human.
Exactly. Or because I'm a good guy, trust me, I'm one of you. None of that is going to work because your authority is going to bring that in no matter if you're the milk of human kindness.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's important. It's only one extra line, like to be super sensitive the way you're talking about to set it up properly rather than, hey, I'd like to meet with you the first thing Monday. It would be, hey, things are really going great in this area. I'd love to talk to you Monday morning
Yes.
about this. When are you available? Now all of a sudden it's energizing. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Rather than ruining their entire weekend. So absolutely. That's on the boss.
Yeah.
For
Uh,
sure.
and I think all of us should be aware of that. And I think it's a good idea to employ that when we can. I've learned that lesson over and over again. So I'm very careful now. And I think the reason it's so important for me, it's about productive engagement with a team. So when we talk about employee engagement, I always want to know, well, engage with what? With the creating the value that we were designed to create. And if we don't do this stuff right, it could be as low as 20% productive engagement. And what if it was 80 or 90% inside an organization or more? The competition would have no chance going through.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So one thing you probably don't know, a partner before he unfortunately passed in my consulting company, ETW, was Jack Welch. So I had
Oh,
lots of conversations with Jack about HR and just so many different things. He became a very good friend. Where do you think HR at larger companies have the most opportunities? Because my observations, a few get it really right, and Jack shared the same view with me, and a few of them missed an opportunity. And I think most of them are about managing administration at scale and protecting the company from employees as opposed to developing everybody to create more value over time. Where are some opportunities for HR departments to, to go after where they typically don't, and when it comes to creating value?
The biggest one in my mind is to connect what you're doing in HR directly to the business. It's not, and and stop using the jargon, stop using the acronyms. It's not OD, it's not TM, it's not XYZ alphabet soup. This is about mm, getting faster to deal with the changes that are showing up in the AI landscape. This is about mm, responding competitively to such and such initiative. Find the anchor, the reason all this work is being done to develop people, to design great orgs, to look at org health or employee engagement. As you were saying, Lee, engage with what? What specific things? So connect the two areas together so that you're not just looked at as a people function, because the work of HR should also be the work of the CEO and the C-suite. That's not going to happen if either you're way too operational and not looking at things strategically, or you're completely divorced from the business of the business.
Yeah. My approach has always been leadership handles the relationships and HR is more just purely administrative, benefits, payroll, that kind of stuff. And in all of my businesses so far, again, largest one was just barely over 500 team members. Never had a traditional HR department. If there was any issue, they would take it to their boss and they could skip it all the way to me if they wanted to. And I never once, and gosh, now over 30 years of these different businesses, never had an employee lawsuit ever, never had an EOC claim that stuck. Maybe 3 or 4 were filed over the years, but there was nothing
Wow.
there. And most companies that have these traditional HR departments, I've never seen one that can say that. They don't have that record. And so it's a different approach. And I would say there were 3 things, we don't have time to go into it today, that should have been an employee lawsuit. But I actually did a metaphorical public hanging for everybody to see. We don't stand for this. Like, we just don't. And all of them went away. Um,
Lee, one of the things you're putting your finger on, which is really critical, is culture. What is the culture you're creating? And culture should not be outsourced to HR or an external consultant. It should be embodied by the CEO and the C-suite. Culture is not what we write on a piece of paper, it's how we act. And so for you to say, I'm going to take a tough stand on this, I'm sure that wasn't an easy decision for you to make. And I'm sure there were people who didn't appreciate it. But the vast majority knew, if I want to be here, I can make a choice. This is what Lee stands for, and this is what Lee does not stand for. You don't want people who are half in, half out. So I think that that's really admirable and great. Every HR executive should have the dream that their internal clients, the executives in the company, own the people relationship and the culture, the org design, the way you're describing it. They can bring in a lot of expertise to partner with that and help with that, but it should be owned by the business.
yeah, it wasn't an option for our leaders. You have to do this. And if they didn't demonstrate that they could do it, that's okay. You just can't be a leader here. And there may be another position for you. And
Yeah.
if not, we
Yeah.
would always help them find another job
Yeah.
as
That's
well.
great. That's great.
And a big part of your job at Microsoft was succession planning. And what Jack told me, Jack Welch, is that for everything you've heard about Crotonville and all the employee development stuff that we do, leadership development, the best he, in his view, they could ever do is fully follow, develop, and position the top 5, maybe 600 team members. But once you got past that, it became more and more of a diffuse check the box exercise. How did you keep that from happening? And when Jack was telling me about this, I was showing him a management operating system I put together at my aerospace company. He said, if I had this, one, he said, best management system he's ever seen. And he said, if he had it at GE, the results would have been exponentially better because he personally could have followed position and developed the top 2,000 leaders And with that explanation, I think he's 100% right on.
Uh-huh.
How did you prevent the check the box
Uh-huh.
thing from happening?
I don't know that I prevented it 100% because I think no matter what you do, there will be some smile sheets, there will be some check the box activities. It was about being very deliberate about different tiers and what they need for their development. At the most senior level, look, sometimes even at the most senior level, we need the most basic training. Great. So those are about skill development. But most of the work has to be on the job development. So we spent a lot of time, not just with the most senior people, but with the most senior jobs. In fact, we studied which jobs traditionally teed people up for the next rung. For example, being a technical assistant to senior execs was a great jumping off point for the next rung of their career for that technical assistance. So then let's place somebody, let's create the slate of candidates for that next technical assistant position very deliberately with people who have the headroom to grow, not people who are career technical assistants, because we've identified that this is a key developmental position. So identifying the positions and the people and doing that in concert really helps you because it's really a lot of it is on the job experience that's going to get you there.
So you had to have had a helping leaders develop other leaders in an intentional program around that, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. What were some elements of that just to help them think more intentionally and continually about it?
Well, the succession planning process itself was a very intentional exercise. We had a specific protocol, some guidelines, ways to think about this so that we're not just bringing in somebody exactly like us or our best buddies, but broadening the lens and not coming in with too many assumptions packed in on who I'm going to develop and who I'm not going to develop. So that was a very deliberate annual process. And over the course of the year, I would run a number of discussions, forums, sessions with HR folks and others on how to work toward the annual process. In addition to that, in leadership development, teaching people how to coach, how to not just pick up the job and do it, but how to coach. In my book about how to use a delegation dial versus a switch, things that build that capacity in the system and the organization. In every organization, there's a tendency to have a bit of a hero culture. And that hero culture, there are many issues with it. And one of them being that the rest of the team doesn't grow. They get stunted when I'm so busy with my cape flying.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. The delegation dial, for one, and I've learned it too many times. So I think I'm finally cured. When somebody says, "Yes, boss, I've got it. Don't worry about it." Oh, that's great. And I can go over here. It virtually never
Never
works.
works. Exactly.
How do you step into that with the right movements in the dial?
Yeah. So for those who haven't read the book, the most of our delegation, number one mistake people make with delegation is treating it like an on-off switch. Here you go. And the employee going, yes, boss, I've got it, because they're also either they don't know that they haven't got it, they think they have, or they're too afraid to say something. And then you get it on Sunday night for a Monday morning presentation, and there goes your night. And now you're micromanaging, you're swooping in. It just is bad all around. So treating it as a dial versus a switch really helps with delegation. It's uh, Dial means you're delegating in little notches based on the employee's skills, knowledge, and experience. If they're doing something for the very first time, even if they're extremely skilled and very experienced in other things, you don't just hand it to them. So when do you just do and have them watch? When do you teach them? This is why I do this in this sequence. When do you coach them? And so on until you can completely hand it over to them.
Okay. And how fast you go and who you give it to, that all matters or depends on what's most important, right? The value that we're trying to create. It's okay to let them fail. Sometimes to develop faster, but sometimes they can't fail.
Exactly. Most of the time, I hear people say we cannot afford to fail. There's no time. It's too high stakes. And so in those cases, don't take your hand completely off the steering wheel. That is not delegation. That is abdication.
Yeah. Well, I love on your website when I go there and it says right on the front, I think it was grow through pressure. And one of my maxims is struggle better and value struggle going through. A lot of leaders, they get very frustrated when the world doesn't lay out perfectly for them. And my thinking is, well, why do we need a leader if everything's perfect all the time? Like, talk about that a little bit. It sounds like you've really nailed it in terms of the growing through pressure.
Yeah, pressure actually, think of the times when we've had that deadline and we've become our most creative. The juices are flowing. Things are all working in sync. Everybody is working in sync as well. Yet, a lot of times, it's not power that corrupts, but pressure. The downside to pressure is it can be a beast, and we can become a beast. And we get short and snippy. We don't provide clear communication, and the impact on other people is that they then kick down just like we are doing, and or they sit and play video games, or as research shows, deliberately sabotage results. So pressure is something that you really need to manage. It is an absolute engine for growth and value creation. It's just most of the time when untended, instead we're redlining on our pressure gauge and then sending everyone else scuttling away redlining on their pressure gauges.
Yeah. Yeah. When you talk, and that stuck out as well in the book, when you talk about pressure corrupts, not power. Most would say power corrupts. You're not talking about morality. I think if I'm getting it right, you're talking about behaviors
Yes.
that come around because of this. Because I think the biggest deficit on the planet today is leaders that are both capable and moral. There's a lot of capable leaders that aren't moral and they intentionally do bad things. You're not talking about that. You're just talking about behaviors that they have no idea how it's impacting them.
They
Yes?
have no idea. They have absolutely no idea. That's happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to you. It happens to just about everybody I coach. So it is about behaviors. It's about the actions we take. When, that snippy little text that says, see me on Monday, that person was probably under a lot of pressure and didn't think through how else I might do this. But normally, maybe they're really caring and empathetic and connected. It doesn't matter. That one text is going to now ruin somebody's weekend. It's not going to get solved. And you're not going to start from zero on Tuesday after that Monday meeting. So it's really about, what do you do when you are under pressure? How do you act? How do you behave?
Hmm. So is awareness the biggest thing? So leaders just have to be aware of this power gap, if you will, in all communications, everything they do appropriately. I mean, this can't be something that's all encompassing all the time, and we can't caretake for everybody constantly. But I don't think it takes that much. I mean, what's your view on that? Just be aware of it and communicate with that extra line effectively.
Awareness is huge, huge. And and it's also difficult to achieve, because in my bubble of special and senior, nobody's telling me the truth. It's hard to know. It's hard to know when I've created that gap. At the end of my book, I have something called 360 Yourself, which is a set of 40 plus questions that you quickly answer to get a sense of, where might I be creating a power gap or a pressure pitfall, and which one might I be creating? So, and here are a few that can shortcut that. If nobody ever disagrees with you or gives you a different idea, chances are you're in a power gap. If you appear to your people funnier, smarter, faster than you know you are, you're likely in a power gap. If you counter most feedback you receive with a yeah, but, likely you're responding to something that in a way that you shouldn't be. So there are these few diagnostics, if you will, that you can run for yourself as a checkpoint, as a checklist. Say, oh yeah, these are the ones I typically fall into. So look at those questions, pick 2 or 3 of those, and ask yourself that every Friday. If the answer is consistently, oh, not so much, then you know you've succumbed to it.
Yeah, I think it's a great list. One of the ways that I try to get at this, and it seems to be pretty effective, I want every team member to be the CEO of their own role and own
Yeah,
all the outcomes associated with it. And
right.
once they make that shift, then I just position myself as I'm here to help you. What do you need to make that
Yeah.
go?
Yeah.
Does that resonate with what you're doing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That mindset of everybody is the CEO of the business or the co CEO, whatever, however you might need it. The thing to watch out for is that delegation dial. Is that doesn't mean I'm not going to be, I am going to be there side by side with you. We're not just going to talk for the first time on the eve of the deadline. So there is a connection aspect that needs to remain when you dub somebody CEO of their business.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a handoff period for sure. And I
Yeah.
always feel like I've gotten there when I meet with them, whatever the right cadence is, once the handoff is done, they're two steps ahead of where I thought they should be or could be.
Right.
Now I'm kind of metaphorically water skiing behind them, not, trying to get them out of bed in the morning to get started. One of the lessons in the book I thought was fantastic was giving advice can be a really bad idea or something like that. Talk about that.
Well, I, for the most part, and there's some research that bears this out, that most people say they want advice and most people don't follow advice. And the reason is that the advice is coming from my position, my experience, how I see the world. Well, I'm never going to know exactly what your position is, what your values truly are, where you're truly struggling. It's much more effective, I find, to ask questions and help people arrive at their own advice. But by asking questions in a way, the deeper, tougher questions, so they can come to those realizations. Some of my best coaching meetings are where I say very little and people talk through something. And then I ask a couple of questions that stop them in their tracks and they go, oh, it seems so obvious when you ask that question, but why did that never occur to me? Boom. That's all. They have the answers. You just need to ask them the right questions. So if we all come with the mindset that the people we manage already have the answers, they're hiding in plain sight. And our job is not to provide them with the answer, but to ask them the question so they can discover the answer themselves. That self excavation increases independence and reduces pressure on you. It increases confidence and it most likely gives them a better answer than one you could have ever provided. That will also require parking your ego for a little bit.
Yeah. Well, how could we possibly know all the dynamics in their business, their team, all of it? So a piece of otherwise at least good sounding advice could blow everything up if they followed it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, leaders, I think, kind of need to be the leader their organization or team needs at that particular time. A friend of mine bought a company and culturally totally different than what he's used to. And it's been interesting kind of coaching him through be the leader the organization needs and
Yes.
where to focus.
Yes.
Yeah, how do you think about that?
Yeah. Yeah. So many senior executives who get hired into organizations at a senior level do not make it past 2 years. And it's not because they lack experience or skills. Obviously, they wouldn't get hired at that level if they did. It's always because of that lack of cultural fit. And they don't read the tea leaves there. It, a, a, a fatal flaw for new executives is to fall into what I call in the book the past experience divide. Coming in into the organization, lacking curiosity, not asking questions, and saying, well, at such and such company where I just worked, we did this way, or this is what worked in such and such organization prior to this organization. That's really not very appealing for the employees who are in the organization to say, this person's been here a minute. What do they know about what we've done or tried? And that organization is so different from us. That's really not going to work over here. So now you have people resisting everything you suggest because of that past experience divide that you have created.
Yeah, and I love the point you made in the book about don't assume they don't know anything. Like
Yes.
over
Yes.
explaining everything is like, oh my gosh. It's like, I think you're stupid in a way. Right? Yeah, talk about that a little bit. And that I see that a lot. Way over explaining, assuming they don't know what they actually they know a lot.
If you were to ask me what is one single thing people should do in senior positions, that one single thing, Lee, would be to shut up. And, and I, so much so that I have a whole page called the shut up muscle exercise to build that shut up muscle. And, and that over explaining is a symptom of not shutting up and assuming cluelessness of other people. What if you were to be the third, fourth, or fifth person to speak in a meeting? What if you shut up, just took notes with your ideas so that they don't get in the way of your listening and see what happens? Chances are 3 or 4 of the 5 ideas you jotted out, others will surface. Isn't it wonderful that others can come up with that? Now the value you can add is with the 5th idea that is truly unique. And you let other people feel smart and capable.
Yeah, I feel disappointed. And that's probably not the right word, but more in myself when the team doesn't come up with something better than I could have come up with, because we're paying a lot of money to these folks sitting around the table. We want their brain power to really, really work.
Absolutely.
So 100% agree. Two things, self-care and blank space time that you talk about in the book. Go into that a little bit. I thought that was fantastic.
Mm, mm. I'm so struck by how thoroughly you have read the book too. So thank you for doing that and these wonderful questions, Lee. With CEOs that I coach, we often create a job description for them, not the formal one, but what are things that are really part of your job? What are you truly responsible for? And then I encourage them to put self care as job number 1. Many of them look at me funny, like, I don't have time for that. Or, yeah, sure, I'll humor you. But it is vital that you prioritize self care in positions of authority, not just for yourself, but for other people. When they see that you're taking the time to go for that run or have a meditation practice or be mindful about sleep, it speaks much far greater volume than you simply mouthing work-life balance is important and self-care is important. Those are all just empty words and management speak that people roll their eyes at. If you really are committed to it, take care of yourself. Everything else will follow.
I love that. Yeah, do what we say. When it's not that, I call it business virtue signaling. I'm saying all the
Yes.
right things going on.
I love that. Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I'm going to borrow that phrase. Absolutely. So
Pre,
instead of virtue signaling, walk that talk. Yeah.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's fantastic. And then the blank space.
Yes. Blank space, the idea is that our best ideas come when our the front part of our brain takes a break. It goes back to we already have the answers. So, our insights mostly come when we're in the shower, when we're running, when we're commuting, all those times where we're not actively processing and going, doing. White space is a practice of 2 hours back to back, once a week, where you completely unplug. You're not online, you're not reading, you're not talking, and you just sit and think. Now, most people feel very uncomfortable with the idea of doing quote unquote nothing. And so if that's hard, you could doodle. You could go for a walk for 2 hours. You could take a big idea, the one that you've been thinking you want to get to, but hard to get to in the 10 minutes in between meetings, and sit down with that and start to create a little sketch or a mind map or idea, just brainstorm. People who have done this practice have found transformational benefits. They have changed careers. They have been promoted. They've shifted the business focus completely because they realized they were missing a big boat that they didn't in the franticness and the frenzy of day-to-day activity. It's a game changer. And you're not going to come up with huge ahas every single white space you do, but you come back with a better rested brain. Better rested brain means you're less reactive to the pressures that come at you and those pressures are less likely to corrupt your actions.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We can't get into it because we don't have much time left, but the micro habits and meditation and so many cool things. You talk about a yes list every day, and you kind of check through it. I'm
Mm.
curious on the meditation piece. You in the book you talk about one mindful breath in, one mindful breath out. Just try that once a day and then see where it grows. I actually think the entire day can be a moving meditation where you stay in the flow. What do you think about that? I'm in my music studio right now. I write music, and it's amazing how the more I work on this practice of making the entire day a moving meditation, it's where the music comes from. It's something
Mm.
way bigger than myself, but it's the same thing around innovation in business and all the coaching work that I do as well.
Say more, Lee. I'm so curious about this making the whole day a moving meditation. How do you do that? What do you say to yourself?
It's almost like a calming, I wouldn't say internal mantra, but just there's a feeling I get when you're in that creative zone. So it's being hyper present, super curious, and appropriately reflective. I think about it those three ways. And I know when I'm getting sort of overwhelmed, I can feel the anxiety or stress kind of going up because there's always 50,000 things going on.
Right.
Just back off, be present, curious, and reflective. And it's crazy how much value there is. And like even getting ready for my guests, getting ready for you, I'll spend minimum 8, usually up to 12 hours getting ready for each guest. And I guess I could say, well, where do I find time for that? I'm just looking for all this value. And there was so much value researching you, reading your book. I'll multitask. I might go on a long hike, but I've got my notes out as I hear things that are really cool in the book. I'm writing these concepts down to talk about. If you can
Yes.
see the board behind me, there's, I don't know, 80 questions that I won't be able to get to here. It's, but that's how I think about it. So it's a feeling, and always, I know what it feels like. So I bring myself closer back to it.
It makes me think that you're also talking about being radically present and aware. It can start with that one breath a day. And then, maybe it's a mindful breath twice a day. And then it's every hour till it becomes much more part of sounds like for you, part of your muscle memory. And it's just second nature. You're going to be aware and present. One practice that some of my clients do is let's say they have an hour-long meeting. At the 30-minute mark, they have an alarm that goes off. And when that alarm goes off, they ask themselves a question. And that question could be around whatever they're working on. Am I fully present? Am I thinking about value creation? Am I listening super well if they tend to not do that? Whatever their question might be, that's mindfulness. So you are more likely to get there, to get to your level of mastery by programmatizing it. Give it some kind of a nudge, reminder, alarm, checklist. I know we're not going to go into a lot of detail on the yes list, but that's something that helps with things like that.
Yeah. And I've got so far to go. I'm probably 1% of what's possible. But boy, does it feel good. And
Yes.
every time I start drifting away, I know what it feels like. I can bring myself back no matter what's going on around me.
Beautiful.
My biggest takeaway, gosh, there's so many, but in this conversation, and it was in the book too, but it's just reinforcing, give it 3 stories that could be true over why do you keep assuming things that are that are sort of negative? So that was huge for me, and
Yeah.
I'm going to use that, big time.
Great.
Was there anything that stood out for you in this conversation?
So much, so much. I'm just reflecting, and that level of ownership that you were talking about. No wonder you've been so successful in serial entrepreneurship and exiting one of your businesses in 9 figures, is that level of ownership where you are not uh, outsourcing that to HR or to anybody. You're saying, I own this and I'm going to stand up and be accountable for it. And I'm going to be mindful of my behaviors as I do this. That's really standing out for me.
All right, thank you. And Sabina, if our listeners want to learn more about you, connect with you, where should they go?
They can go to my website, sabinanawaz.com. The book is, of course, available anywhere books are sold. They can also follow me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and all the usual platforms.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay. And this has been the Show Your Value podcast. If you got some value out of today's episode, please like, leave a review, and subscribe. Until next time, show your value to the world.